All right. Hey. Hi, Jason. Good
Here
to
comes
see you again,
Nancy.
buddy.
You know this is my first time, right?
Because we are popping that cherry. What? I'm recording. I'm doing adult things over here.
Play around with it. See if there's anything worthwhile
Yeah, Nancy.
holding on to there.
Play around with it.
Yeah, it sounds like a boat motor underwater.
It does.
I'll show you mine if you show me yours. Yeah.
And I went into this guy's garage. He had like 5 or 6 blow-up sheep, like hanging from the rafters. I'm like, what the?
No.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to praise him, but yeah, you do whatever you want.
I meant a Dark Lord.
Welcome back to season 2 of Apostate Sisters. This season, we're starting with the topic of bodily autonomy. We're exploring how control was taken from us as children in the high control environment of the worldwide Church of God. And we're exploring what it means to reclaim ourselves and retake our bodily autonomy. As part of our ongoing mission to create healing spaces, we're stepping up our efforts to foster community and provide resources to those on the journey. And we have some exciting news. We have finally just launched our Patreon. If you want to support the show and connect with us in a more personal way, check out the link for Patreon and become one of our sinful siblings. So welcome to the first episode of season 2. Nancy and I are here as usual, and we have a special guest for this episode. Our good friend Jason is here as a trusted male as we embark on today's topic, which is masturbation. All 3 of us grew up in a doomsday cult called the Worldwide Church of God. We knew that premarital sex was wrong, but in the church, the topic of masturbation was a little more taboo, a little more difficult to talk about. But that doesn't mean we didn't get a lot of church messaging. So we're here today to talk about the messages we received growing up from the culture, from the church, and what we think about it today. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jason. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yay! We're so glad
Great.
you could be on the show.
Me too. It's
Yeah.
way
We've been
overdue.
friends for a little while now, but this is the first time you're actually on the channel. I know we haven't done an interview with you yet to kind of introduce you to people, but you've been very involved with helping us in our social media, so we're very appreciative to you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I love your background, Jason. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's Ghost, the band. It's their
Oh,
backdrop.
yes.
It's
I
their
heard of this.
cathedral like background.
You introduced me to them,
Their concert.
yes.
Yeah, good shit.
Hoochie Hooch Distillery, Blackberry Hooch from Alabama. Yeah. Tell me
Oh.
more.
It's in a mason jar. That's awesome.
Hoochie Strong, woman owned and operated. That's what exciting.
How is it?
Oof, it'll burn your ball hairs off, Jason. Women tend to use the term me time a lot. I gotta go have some me time.
Choking the chicken,
Beating the meat, flicking the bean, paddling the pink canoe.
tossing yourself off.
Ew, what about playing the skin flute?
Softening the peach. I heard oozing the noodle.
Jerking the gherkin. That's probably not a very good one, though, because a gherkin's a very tiny little pickle.
Manual override.
I'd never heard double clicking the mouse. I think that's fucking funny.
Really?
Oh, that's from American Pie.
You never double clicked your mouse?
Buttering your muffin.
Did we say rub one out yet?
Petting the cat. Beating the bishop. Oh, dialing the rotary phone. I've heard that one. Doing a Meg Ryan. Orbiting Venus. Boxing the what-eyed champ. Smearing the bearded clam.
No.
Tapping into your potential and giving yourself a hand. Okay, I'm done. I just wanted to
Bearded clam.
Are we loosened up yet?
That was one of the masturbation things, right? They said that you'd get hairy palms if you masturbated.
Ah,
Or go blind.
Or go blind. Exactly.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah,
like
I'm
if you
with
cross
Auntie.
your eyes, your face will get stuck like that. It's kind of like in that same
Mhm.
genre of wisdom that's not wise.
No, I've heard moonshine makes you go blind. Speaking of which, I got some right here.
Moonshine literally does make you go blind. If it's the out of the still, if it's the first or the last bit out of the still, it actually does do something to you and make you go
Yes, you have to
blind.
be careful when you make it. Yeah.
Yikes. Well, all right. So anyway, we
Yeah.
all are cult kids. We all grew up in the Worldwide Church of God. And Jason, you're just like a year older than me. So it was the 80s and 90s. Yay.
Right.
So we had a lot going on in the world about sex too. And
Lots of
masturbation.
fear-based.
Yeah.
Lots of fear-based stuff. I feel like I remember politically, I remember like as a teenager, I'm hearing stuff about like the fight over whether they should provide condoms in school or not, or do
Right.
abstinence teaching, right? And like masturbation, whether we want to think it is or not, is absolutely all wrapped up in that idea, right? Because like they should have been teaching masturbation if they were teaching abstinence, but of course that wasn't what they were doing.
Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned the whole Christians going about condoms here. Even when I was stationed in Iraq, people provided condoms for people because you're overseas for an entire year in the desert, bored most of the time. Of course, people are going to be fucking each other. It happened all the time. Everyone was just kind of partnered off for those few months we were there. But yeah, a lot of the hardcore Christians had a problem with it. They're like, okay, do you want people to get pregnant? Like, they're gonna do it anyway. Like, that is not the answer to not provide them with something overseas. I mean, you have to have options. It's not
Right.
like you have a drugstore down the street where you're on a base in the middle of the desert. So,
Well, and this is why it was such a big deal. I think it was like Clinton era that the attorney general at the time really wanted there to be proper education and condoms for teenagers because at the time teen pregnancy was like a big deal in the country. But right, it was the Christians pushing back of like, how could we do that? We're going to make them do more sex. Like, no, you're not going to make them do more sex. But I do think,
All the while they're trying to train them for abstinence, and that's it. They just want them to
well,
stick with that.
right. I mean, so like I guess I don't understand why the furor over masturbation would even exist,
mhm.
right? So like maybe it would serve us well to like we understand that this was like a contentious issue in the whole culture and politically and all of that shit too, but then we were like in our own little bubble of WCG stuff,
Mhm.
hearing that we'd heard our whole lives about sex.
Sexual sin.
Sexual sin.
That's all I ever
Right.
heard.
Really? When you say sexual sin, are you saying that it was kind of like you hardly ever heard the word sex unless it was attached to the word sin?
It seemed like just the word sex was attached to sin. And then when they were ever talking about husband and wife, it was sleeping together. So as a little kid, you just thought that your parents were sleeping in the bed together. That's what parents do. And
Yep.
there's hugging and kissing and going on, and that's about it. They never talked about sex between a husband and a wife and that being beautiful. I don't remember that. At least at my congregation. I don't know what they were saying at other places. I don't know what you guys were hearing.
Yeah, I was trying to remember that too, like from little kid days, what I remember. Since in the Worldwide Church of God, they didn't have like nursery or a kids' church or anything.
Right.
We had our lessons that we would do like after services or
After.
whatever, but they wanted all the kids in there hearing the doom and gloom from the
On our blanket.
ministers on our blanket between the folding chairs. Right? It's so funny how ubiquitous that was. But I don't know how much I remember that being talked about. And I'm trying to decide where that messaging was, if it was through the correspondence courses or the booklets, or where the like sex masturbation stuff was like getting to our parents.
I mean, the only place we've really ever seen it was in the book that we're covering in our Unpack It series, The Missing Dimension in Sex, which he only has a few references, Herbert W Armstrong. And it's just kind of combined with bestiality and atheism and non-belief. It's just kind of like, you're not supposed to do these things, right? But it wasn't talked about. Because why would he need to talk about it? It's just like, no, you obey there's no room for discussion. You just don't do this. But I feel like when it comes to masturbation, Jason, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like a lot of churches are really only referring to the men because they know women masturbate, but it's like, I feel like it's on a different level. They really
Do they,
zero
though?
in on men jerking it. They just don't assume that, oh, women, they're just, they're supposed to be pure. They're not going to do that.
Right. It seemed like when I was going to the Pentecostal church, it seemed like the women had more of self-control, or at least
Mhm.
that's how it was perceived
Self-control.
compared to the men. Because like when I was going to men's group, they were all confessing all their sexual sin. And then here's me over in the corner going, I'm fine. I'm good. And I just didn't associate with any of that shit.
Okay, so you never confessed that you were doing it. You just didn't get
Fuck
involved in
no.
the conversation at all. Oh, good. Okay.
No.
But you're
No.
saying this was from your later experience in like a Pentecostal
Yes.
church, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I went to a
Yeah, not
Pentecostal
WC.
church later in life for about 8 years. And I did the men's
Yeah.
group for roughly about 6 months before I just could not handle it anymore.
I can only imagine the things they talk about in men's groups, like,
Oh, yeah.
Let's find out.
It was
Jason,
it
tell us
was
all about men's
it was
groups.
all basically based around sexual sin, whether it was pornography, whether it
Mhm.
was thinking about another woman, lusting after somebody's wife. It seemed like it was basically all about that. Maybe every once in a while, maybe talking about drinking here and there, but all
Mm.
sexual sin.
Could you
So
masturbate when you were married even? Like, were they okay with that or no? That wasn't okay.
So obviously, I'd known guys that were married,
Mhm.
and they would talk about their issues and addictions with pornography. Tears and all. Yeah.
would you say that we as women should assume that if pornography is being discussed and the struggle with pornography, that is just like one and the same as masturbation being the problem? That like that's just going along with it,
Yeah.
and that's the assumption in those groups? Is that what you
It
would say
seemed
is
like
true?
it. Seemed like it was all lumped all together. For sure.
Did you actually feel guilty for masturbating? Well, not first off, how early did you start masturbating? Can I ask? Because I think Patti, I was probably the earliest, right? I got caught in the backyard.
You
No?
got caught first time, Nancy?
I did get caught. Well, Patti told on me.
Oh.
And I don't remember this at all. This is horrible. Okay.
I remember masturbating when I was at a very early age. I wanted to do it all the time. I loved it. I tell you what, I had fantasies too. I thought about, boys on the playground, like little Latino boys on the playground. I had these thoughts in my head. So somebody cannot tell me that a child does not have sexual thoughts. I did at a very young age. I don't remember when it was, but yeah, I did it all the time. And, as kids growing up in the Worldwide Church of God, you're taught to tell on each other. Then, yeah, I had to fess up, and Dad had to ask, oh, what was I doing? And I had to explain, but then he told me that's for my husband and not for me. Not that it stopped me. So I'm wondering, was there guilt and shame surrounding you and your story as far as masturbating? And like, what age did you start? And did you have that kind of cloud over your head? Because I would say I never did. Because again, I never actually believed in a God. I just
Right.
got better at making sure I didn't get caught.
So I was born in the late 70s. When it came to just sex in general, that was a 4-letter word in our household. Like that word was not used whatsoever. I didn't even know what sex was. I would see probably the missing dimension in sex on the back table at church
Ugh.
because it sounded familiar when you guys actually started talking about it.
Mhm.
But my parents did not own that book. My grandmother did not own that book, and she was a deaconess at our congregation. So
Deaconess, that's a thing.
deaconess, yeah. They serve coffee and tea and,
Oh,
you know,
so a secretary, not a deaconess.
basically, but she was also distributing the plain truth. I got to
Mhm.
join her on that at times. I was probably 6 to 7 years old was when I started realizing that something works down there in the
Mhm.
bathtub. And I remember always being told that that's dirty, do not touch. And that was always just full of shame, constant.
So whenever you masturbated or figured that out, you felt guilt over it.
Yeah.
Like you thought
Yeah.
God was watching every move, huh?
Right. Well, and then every single time that there was talked about was sexual sin. at church, like I made the connection with that just in my young brain. So I always just assumed that I was doing something wrong. But, as a boy, even at that age, you still get kind of horny. Like it's going to happen. You're human. You get sensations.
Yep.
Something's going to happen. There's bubbles, all that jazz. So like, parents aren't around. You're going to start exploring your body as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. You
But-
realize, hey,
As
when
you should.
as
Yeah.
we should, it's ours to explore and enjoy.
Right. But I didn't actually hear the word penis until I was a little bit older. It was always called the pee-pee.
Yeah, they should
I
always
would
use
say.
the actual terms for our body parts. I hate
Yeah,
it when people do that.
I
You're just
remember the
confusing
word
your
penis
children.
being said, but I don't remember where. But it wasn't until I remember watching PBS, and it was a nature channel, and they were talking about an animal, and they said penis, and I was like mortified. Just because of the word being used, and my parents were in the room, and they still didn't take the opportunity to talk with us boys. I know. Even about the birds and the bees. Didn't happen.
Did to find out the hard way, huh?
Yeah. But just the word pee-pee, I always just associated it with just pee. That's all it was for. Because you brand it pee-pee, what else is it going to be for?
I think that's the advantage to those wanting to control that part's
Right.
function.
Well, Jason, for the longest time, I thought that babies came out of the butthole. Yeah, and Patti actually
I
taught
thought
me.
that too, actually.
Yep, because no one taught me.
Hot dog in a bun? I thought that too. That wasn't until later, though, when I was,
Yeah. And I didn't realize that when it came to sex, of course, I was a young child, but I didn't realize that the dick going in, like there was friction. I thought it was just, hey, you put it in and that's it.
Right.
I didn't realize there was movement. Like,
One and done.
I just thought it was like a soaking situation also for the longest time. Well, I don't know how it happened. Like, I guess I just lucked out in some ways that our mom, since I was the oldest, she must have had enough time with me. And I think she had read some Dr. Spock, which is not a Star Trek thing. That was a guy who was
clearing that up.
it was a guy who was kind of a big name in like child rearing at the time, I think. And so thankfully, I think our mom read that and thank you, and felt like she should tell me all the things that were happening. So like I knew that a penis went in a vagina to make a baby because you were on the way, Nancy. And so mom felt like I should know those things. But despite being taught the real things and the real words and all of that, I too thought it was a hot dog in the bun situation and a soaking situation. But I don't think that's a problem. Like, I don't think kids have to know everything. But for damn sure, what kids should know is that their body is theirs. And they should know some things about hygiene, about, yeah, it's yours. Have all the fun touching it you want. Just, this is a thing you do in this place, not that place. And you wash your hands before and after.
Right.
Right? Like, that is a big deal. So for whatever reason, I knew enough to be able to help you learn things, Nancy. I don't know why you didn't get taught the same things I did, but
Pets, I think when it came to our parents, it's maybe a WCG thing, but they put so much pressure on the firstborn. I mean, we heard that term, the firstborn. They just expected that they could teach you things and it would just trickle down. Like as the oldest, you would just teach us younger kids the same things. I don't know. I just feel like that's kind of how it was.
Well,
I don't remember them teaching me anything directly. I had to learn everything the hard way. You taught me like everything about the world, Pets. Our parents didn't.
Yeah, you're
Let's see
welcome, I
if
guess.
it's working. No. I don't know why it's not working anymore.
So I mean, it's interesting to me that even in our one household, going to the same church with the same parents, you and I had a really different experience of learning about these things.
Yep.
And so then, Jason, you and I have talked, I would say, extensively about some of this from your upbringing years too. And the impression I got from you was that your parents, like, it wasn't that any of the kids in your family got this information, and that it was almost like purposely hidden from you.
Yep.
So it was my mother and my grandmother that started in 62 at Worldwide Church of God. So my mother was indoctrinated at 12 years old, and my grandmother has possibly a Quaker background. Very prudish grandmother. She was always that way.
That would make sense.
When I was 4 to 6 years old, summertime, and I was playing with the boy next door, and we were always just digging in the dirt with probably Star Wars toys.
Masculine.
I know, but kind of a shame because they're probably worth money now. So he had a younger sister, and she was probably only like 2 to 3 years old at the time, and she came out naked out to the yard.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking in her direction and not understanding what I'm looking at, and just complete mind fuck. And I remember the boy next door trying to explain to me that we all don't have the same parts, but it still did not register in my brain.
Yeah.
It was maybe 20, 30 minutes later, I went to go do my chores, and my mother cornering me in the kitchen, asking me, "You know that girls are different, right?" And I was just so shocked and kind of scared. And so I just said, "Yeah," just out of fear.
What?
And then that was the end of the conversation. There was nothing else being said whatsoever, but that girls are different. So
Your
that's how
answer actually should have been no. Actually, I don't know their bodies are
Right.
different because you
Right.
never fucking taught me anything about it, and neither did
Right.
my school because the education
Right.
system sucks when
But
it
I-
comes to sex ed.
But I was also homeschooled till the 4th grade. I was not in public school. We were extremely sheltered.
Yeah.
And then once I got into elementary school, we were pulled out of class when it came to puberty time, when they talked about puberty, when they started talking about sex. To the library we went.
But your mother never taught you anything. So what was she expecting you
I got
to?
a booklet. I didn't read the booklet out of fear. So just as you two, my body was not my own.
Mhm.
That's how I was taught. My dad, he was never very hands-on as a parent, just by how he was raised, unfortunately. So it was more of my mom raising us boys.
Mhm.
I would say I was roughly around 12, 13 years old, and my father was talking with my older brother about Paul Rubens. This was early 90s, late 80s, that he got caught masturbating or playing with himself in a movie theater.
I remember that.
And so I remember him making a joke and me not understanding why this is a joking matter when this is something that's bad,
Mhm.
just by how I was raised. But afterwards, I remember getting very curious, and I want to say it could have been that very same afternoon, if not the next day, but I want to say it was that same day that I went to the bathroom, and I decided that let's see what's going on here. So one thing led to another, and I didn't stop, and freaked me the fuck out.
Mm.
Like
Oh my
beyond
gosh.
anything I could have comprehended what was going to happen. And then obviously followed by lots of shame and fear. So lots of cleanup.
Oh, because you didn't expect that. You had no idea that was
I
even a
had not a
thing.
clue. Not a clue. None
That's
whatsoever. And I was like 12 or 13 years old, and I had no idea that that was going to happen.
Okay, no,
whatsoever.
this is too far, but there's a part of me that wants to be like, no, that's like abusive for a child not to be taught these things about their
Patti, you're
own
not wrong
fucking
about that.
body.
You're
Yeah,
not wrong.
neglectful for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like people that don't teach their female children, hey, you're gonna get periods at some point. Like there are some women in history that were not told about this at all, and they're bleeding out their cooch. Can you imagine how freaked out they would have been?
Right.
Yeah, teachings like that should be locked in place for sure.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can only imagine little, like, not even teenager you, like, oh, that feels good figuring this thing out, but it's kind of wrong. I don't know. And then, holy crap, like, all this stuff comes out. Like, what would you even think if you had no
Yeah.
idea? What would you
I
think? Be
thought
like, oh my God, everything's going to leak out my body. I'm going to be a big puddle of goo on the floor, and everyone's going to know what I did.
I honestly thought that something went wrong with myself.
Mm,
Yeah,
because oh my gosh.
yeah.
Jason.
But I don't know, like time wise of when I did it again, because eventually you know the sensation, so eventually you're gonna get curious once again after
Right.
all that shame kind of just dissipates over time.
I guess
So
you didn't die, and like
I
God
didn't
didn't
die,
smite you,
but
and
I was smart enough to start going into the shower because I knew the battle of that cleanup was just horrendous, and
The
so
shower's a man's best friend.
yeah, yeah, and a Sears catalog.
Oh, Sears is going out of business.
aw,
Right.
what are boys of the future gonna do? Oh, maybe the boys of the current time have phones. Never mind then. We're fine.
And pornography, and not mom bras to look at.
Well,
That's
that was your first whacking it story. What about ours?
didn't take me long to figure out. I mean,
How old were you, Nancy?
I don't even know. I never paid attention to ages.
Guess? Do you have a guess?
5,
Age?
maybe?
5?
Probably 5, yeah. I was
Okay.
really young. I was really young. Wow.
And you figured it out like to orgasm?
Yeah.
Not just like I'm just gonna touch and like, ooh, I don't know what's going on there, but something.
Oh, I
Really?
figured out a way to use both my hands. Yeah. Yeah. Because sensation needed to be faster. It needed to be faster. And so I found a way to use both hands. Yes. This was long before vibrators. I was able to have access to vibrators, and I don't even know when they started coming onto the scene, but
Vibrators?
yeah, vibrators, yeah.
Turn the century.
Oh. Vibrators were a medical device at first. I think
For
there's some urban legends kind of built up around the original vibrators, but yeah, they were like a medical device
Mhm.
that a
Well,
doctor would administer to a woman who needed to, have her hysteria cured. I think that might be the part that's sort of urban legend. I don't know. It existed though. The vibrator existed as a medical device.
well, the
100 years
world's
ago.
oldest dildo. How old is that?
No, there was long stones being
I
used
mean,
from the beginning of time. Come on
Yeah,
now.
I remember seeing something about the world's oldest dildo.
it was just a stone dildo. It would make sense that people, women in ancient times, or even men who wanted it up their butt, would have partaken. They would have
Well,
found a
yeah,
way to get off. There were people that existed before the guilt and shame of Christianity came onto the scene. So
exactly.
look at how much we see sexual things in these ancient religions before this fucked it all up.
I even think a bunch of the ancient stuff that was sexual has already been like got destroyed or whatever. Like I think probably we don't even have access to how much sexual things there was going on back in the day. Sorry, where'd we leave off?
I forgot what I was going to say. Where was I going?
Well, using both
we were
hands.
we were talking. You remember that part? Cool. I can't believe you got caught. Yeah.
Well, I got caught because I didn't figure things out until it was with a mechanical device.
How old were
Uh,
you then?
12. I'd always like touched myself and stuff, but never figured out like, oh, there's like a goal, there's a finish, there's a like ooh la la moment to this. I'd never figured that part out.
Because it takes time to get to that point. Yeah.
I suppose that makes sense. But so I was at my friend's house for a sleepover, and we had a back massager. We were using that, and then I think she fell asleep, and I was like, and then I was like, oh, and I figured it out from that. I was like,
massager is a vibrator.
uh-huh.
That's hilarious. I don't know these stories, Patty, so I'm loving it.
Oh no, kids, it gets worse. It gets worse because there was a day that I was sick and stayed home from church, and I I had asked if I could borrow the back massager from my friend's family. It's so embarrassing, you guys. It's not,
From
it's not like
church?
I stayed home from church to get myself off.
On our
all
day
day.
of rest? Seriously? What the
Yes.
fuck?
Yeah. There was no rest for my vulva that day.
Patty, it's like my other shirt. I'm sorry I missed church. I was busy masturbating.
Literally like that. It's literally what I did. Yeah. So
That's so fucking
Yeah.
awesome, Pat.
yeah,
I never
so
heard
y'all
that
got
before.
home from church, and then Dad was like, "I know what you were doing. You need to know that's for your husband." It was cool. It was a great day. It was a great day in my life. Let me tell you.
Wait. Dad said that to you?
Yep.
How did he
Isn't
know
that
what you were
cool?
up to?
I was gonna say, how did you know?
I don't know.
Do you think they were just kind of keeping an eye on us in just a creepy way? Like kind of like God who always watches his people and judges them when they masturbate. Like our parents were kind of like that too. Just like, man, put the
I
smack down. They're ready.
probably wasn't subtle, and I probably also like thought I had figured out something that like the world didn't know about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, since they'd never told me about it other than like I remember being like 3 years old with my like legs up on the couch and like getting in there, checking things out like, "Oh, look, if you open there, look, there's other stuff in there." Right? And being told in no uncertain terms I need to get down, that was dirty. Maybe I got spanked, things like that.
Nice.
So I wasn't going to tell anybody this cool thing I figured out because obviously I wasn't supposed to know about it. But then me and Shaky Things, we had a good relationship after that. Squiggle Wiggle Writers, the pen. Oh yeah, that works too. Find an old electric toothbrush no one uses anymore. That works too, just so you know. See, embarrassing.
But
It doesn't
no,
get
Pat,
more embarrassing than this, guys.
I love it. See, you went like the vibrator route right
I
away.
did.
Like I
It's
figured out
what I
how to use
knew.
my fingers, but
I'm a
you were
little
all
sad
about
I
the
didn't
fingers.
figure out the fingers. I think
Wow.
there was some sort of something where I could separate myself from the shame a little bit if it wasn't me. Yeah, so there you go. Me and all the mechanized fun.
You're kind of MacGyvering your way through, though. I mean, just
MacGyver masturbation.
minus the duct tape.
Oh God,
And the-
don't stick that anywhere down there. That's not how I want to MacGyver get my pubes waxed. Just duct tape.
What was the booklet? Was it a Worldwide Church of God?
No, it was probably like 10 to 20 pages long. And I want to say that there was some drawings in there, like cartoon like stuff. I just remember flipping through it because my mom gave it to me.
Yeah.
Was it like a
My dad,
puberty booklet?
no, as far as I knew, it was kind of like a birds and the bees, like how sex kind of worked. I don't know to what extent. I just remember my mom giving it to me, and I was absolutely mortified that my mom gave it to me. And I remember my young brain going, why the hell is my dad not giving this to me? My dad did not go to church. He was driving us to the Feast of Tabernacles, and he would come to a few services. He would come and see us play basketball and volleyball during YOU shit,
Mhm.
But other than that, he was not associated with the church.
And Nancy, don't you remember that being a thing? Like we would know which families where the dad didn't come or whatever.
I don't
I don't
know.
know. I mean, I remember it, but I don't remember it being like the worst thing ever necessarily.
Mhm.
But it was definitely like a thing we noted. Because that's a
To
big deal in the church.
Herbert W Armstrong's credit a little bit here. And just going through the book, Missing Dimension and Sex, which we're doing in our Unpack It series, he does mention that he doesn't agree with people saying like sexual parts are dirty and icky and not supposed to talk about them. So Armstrong actually was like, no, these are meant to be like a beautiful thing, but used in the context of a married couple. Like he never was just like that. I feel like that's more of an evangelical thing. And, even with Catholics too, like, hey, your body parts are dirty, just dismiss them. But no, Armstrong actually taught that, they're beautiful, but you use them in this context. So I do actually appreciate that a little better.
And that surprised me, but my grandmother did not own that book. They were too prudish to even like consider having that book in the house to
Right.
even like educate themselves.
I feel like
However,
you're bringing up a good point, though, by mentioning that, Jason, because what I've recognized as we've started, talking with people about their experiences in the church is it's like the church almost put out so much content in all directions that it was like, he had certain ways that he controlled people, but it was almost like there was room to find yourself, like whatever preconceived like things you brought to the Worldwide Church of God, I felt like you could find it, so it was like clearly your family, whatever their background, came to Worldwide like already with that like extreme purity message. And so weirdly, it seems like Worldwide's slightly more openness to it didn't really get through, which makes
Right.
sense because they were already so trapped in their own purityness.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that they weren't going to just be like, well, Armstrong says it's beautiful, so I guess I'm going to drop all of my shame, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, then it's obvious to me, like Armstrong did say that kids should be taught the real words for things, right? So it's like you were getting something that was like WCG and beyond.
Right. And that's what surprised me out when you guys were reading some of the chapters out of the book too, that you're supposed to actually call it by its names.
Gosh, that
Actually
stuff
kind
is
of
just
pissed me
so
off.
important. Well, yeah. I mean, because you made a good point with that if you were taught to call it pee-pee only,
Mhm.
well, then that was like the one function associated with it, and you weren't even like allowed to think of anything else.
I know I should probably thank Marty Stauffer, but he's dead now, unfortunately. Marty Stauffer, Wild America, PBS. Yeah. Nature show.
What's what is it? When we were in high school, what was that song? It was like, you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals.
So let's
Yeah.
do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. That is Bloodhound Gang, by the way, Patti.
Right.
Bloodhound Gang.
Yep.
Okay.
You remember they wrote a song about I just wish I was queer so I could get chicks.
That's right. I remember that.
Yep.
I forgot about
Same
that
guys.
song.
Same guys.
Huh.
I just wish I was queer so I could get chicks, dig guys that are queer, guys that don't dig chicks, that don't dig guys like me. See, I'm not queer, I'm too ugly. See, I'd be a good listener, so she'd treat me like a sister, and soon I'd become a trusted friend that cares and rubs her back and braids her hair. No, it wouldn't take a week until I'm in her underwear. I wish I was queer so I could get chicks.
So did you guys get any kind of education at school when it came to like sex class or anything? Like how
I
did that work out
remember
for you?
sex ed, yeah. In
Okay.
California, we
How
went
old?
to
Or what grade at least,
would
maybe?
have been like 10th grade.
I know
Okay.
fifth grade was puberty stuff, and I want to say
Right.
7th,
That's when I
8th
was pulled
grade.
out was 5th grade. Yeah.
Okay. For sure, 7th and 8th, we had more like sex ed stuff. It was 6th grade. I remember the boys on the playground having learned about periods and tampons. And I just remember them being like, it's so weird. It's like sticking a pencil up your butt. But yeah, we had the full everything at school, sex ed stuff.
I remember,
wanna
but
say-
California was better about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say it was 8th grade was when I actually got to start understanding what was going on in
Okay.
health class. But even the teacher that we had, she was kind of prissy. So she always seemed very nervous on just teaching the material. So, and all the boys were always making jokes and she was always
course.
just red-faced and couldn't hardly ever get through the material to begin with. So it was frustrating for me that I was still so just not getting the answers. What about WCG? Did they ever do anything for you guys like growing up?
The only thing I remember was the YOU dances. I mean, maybe they figured we'd figure it out at the YOU dances. I remember
With
going
all the
to
chaperones?
Well, I don't know. There must have not been that many chaperones because by the time I was a teenager in Wisconsin, I just walked out the door with somebody and we were on the back hill behind the
Oh,
gym making out. That was my first base experience too. And I remember coming back in later and being told by my mom, like, I know where you were. Okay.
yeah. That kind of shit
I'm
was
just
not going around because our minister was like hounding kids. He was like literally going around grounds every single fucking dance.
Wow.
Oh yeah, he was busting them left and right. It was so pathetic and sad. Yeah.
Well, see, they kind of created this situation where they like clamp down our sexuality so much as kids and then put us in a situation where of course that's going to like show itself cuz like we're bodies together at a dance
Yep.
Mhm.
and then we don't have any like risk assessment that we learned or like understanding we own our own bodies around any of that. So none of us are
Right.
like mentally, emotionally prepared for the teenage hormones that we're all experiencing, and then they have
Right.
to go around and stop us because we have no ability to like handle ourselves in that situation.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember even an older girl. She was like at least 2 years older than me, and this was during a basketball event. It was at a school, of course, and she got busted with another boy from another congregation, making out, whatever, and it was spread around. Everybody found out, and then she kind of disappeared. I
Mm.
want to say she was like around 16 or so, and she stopped coming to church after that.
I'm
Yeah.
sure for the guy it was perfectly fine, but for her, she felt a lot of that guilt and shame surrounding it because
Oh yeah,
she got blamed for being that little temptress,
right. Well, even kids younger than her found out about it. I mean, I
Mhm.
couldn't imagine how that would have felt for her. So I was about 14, 15 years old. I want to say this was summertime,
Mhm.
and we found out that we were all going to join other congregations at this auditorium, that it was going to be a teen event. I'm not sure if I actually knew what it was all about. I just remember being sitting in that auditorium and the film being shown, and they were talking about sex.
Sex is something that, yes, me and my friends have experienced and experimented with.
I want to have sex.
I'm not gonna be interested in that person. I'm just like attracted to their body or stuff.
Most everybody in high school is having sex before they're married.
And a lot of talk about STDs.
You know, just a few years ago, there were only 5 sexually transmitted diseases that you had to worry about. Now there are over 20. People are becoming more perverted, having dirtier sex.
A lot about unwanted pregnancies.
Condoms are a good message, yeah. I mean, if you're gonna have sex anyway, why not use a condom?
Nothing but fear-based.
Yeah.
And I just remember squirming in the chair like, fuck, like, holy shit, I do not want to be in here. And I just kept on taking bathroom breaks constantly. And I think eventually a parent found me and pulled me back into the auditorium. And I'm sitting there kind of hiding in the back, not wanting to be here, you know. But at the same time, like, at this point, I still kind of didn't understand what sex even was.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, I still thought it was kind of like a hot dog and a bun thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like 14, 15 years old, and they're talking about STDs and condoms and unwanted pregnancy and all this. And then they're still not talking about what sex actually is.
Yeah.
You know?
The thing that really I took from that video, super cringy, but
Yeah. Gotta
they
love
also
Kirk Cameron.
associated, Kirk Cameron's the worst.
I think it's real easy sometimes to look at life like it's just this great ride, or it's just this awesome game and you're out to have as much fun as you can until it's over.
You see so much and hear so much about sex almost everywhere you go.
The whole video was a lot of not just sex, but kids going out and having a great time. And they put so much shame on that to be like, hey, if you're going out with your friends having a great time, you shouldn't be doing that because look at all these terrible things that could happen to you. So I felt
Right.
like it wasn't even just sex. It was about having fun, which that was big for me growing up in
Yeah.
Worldwide Church of God. It was just, if you're happy, if you're having a great time, smiling, laughing, whatever it is, you're probably doing something wrong. It's probably you're sinning.
It was like the Dare program 2.0.
Yes.
A little. It
Yeah.
felt like it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
If sex was a drug.
It's wild to me how, masturbation, there's a legit term just for touching that one particular part of your body. Like if we rub our neck and like, oh, this feels great. Oh, I'm kind of getting turned on right now because it feels so good. Getting out that kink and all. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that apparently. It's just that one particular part that you're not allowed to touch.
Is
I'm
it
just
because
not
stuff comes out? I don't know. We're not so weird about blowing our noses.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the combination of the rubbing and the stuff coming out?
Or is it about lustful thoughts too?
Oh, well.
Well, that too, but yeah.
It's true.
Fuck
I
anyone
mean,
who-
maybe that is
Especially
it.
for the
Maybe.
guy.
Right. Right. Because there's such a bigger assumption of lustful thoughts going on there, right?
Apparently us women don't get it.
That came up earlier. You were saying the idea that, like, yeah, it's like assume that women don't get lustful thoughts, that women
Right.
don't masturbate, all of those things. And I think we can see that pretty clearly, even when we look through the WCG stuff, that like they weren't really trying to address the women. They
No,
were just trying to make sure the women, kept their pussy parts to the right man. That was, and
Well,
in
back
God's
then,
perfect
what
timing.
Playboy and Hustler were big back in the 80s and 90s. Like, I mean, there was all that pornography out there in regular bookstores too. So
True.
Right.
that wasn't helping the males.
Yeah, I don't know why they focused on the men so much. Or maybe they just thought men can't control their bodies whatsoever, and they're the ones
Okay.
that get people pregnant. So
Here's why. Because if they're out there talking about, oh, those women and they just want to have sex all the time and stuff, well, guess what? All the little girls who are feeling like, oh, I'm having to be good. And then you're also recognizing by what they're saying, like, oh, women really like having sex. And so you have that idea in your head, even if you're not supposed to. You have that idea that that's how that works, that's how it works for some people, right? But as soon as all of the things they're saying are like basically just ignoring the fact that women are sexual and only addressing the men and talking about, now ladies, you have to make sure you're doing it often enough when he really wants to, because that's how you take care of him. Like, all of those messages, by omitting the sexual nature, are actually reinforcing the non-sexual nature of those girls growing up in that, right? Because they're not going to even connect with their physical sensations of a orgasmic nature if they've been told or like taught in so many ways, even unsaid ways, that that's not who they are. That's not what their body does. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Like, they didn't have to say women don't. They didn't have to address that women do get sexy and they shouldn't. Just by like ignoring it completely, it makes women think that they're not sexual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a very good point. Very
Right.
good.
But all the
Wow.
while, religion was always ran by men. I mean,
Right.
That too.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so
for sure.
yeah. So
Mhm.
if they're all the rules and everything's ran by a man that continue to get tempted at a daily basis, whether they're trying to be pure or not, they all know what men think. So they're
That's
gonna just
true.
they're gonna gear it towards the male, especially in their teen years.
Right.
Maybe it was just all-
Visually, they're having erections on top of that,
That's
Yeah.
true.
so that's not helping things. And boys are always going to be a little bit more vocal when they see a woman,
Mhm.
when they're all congregated together.
I feel like women do the same thing, but yeah.
Right. But I think it's a little more hushed when it comes to the women, though. compared
Usually,
to-
yes. I might be an
Yeah,
exception
usually.
to the rule, but yeah.
Right.
I think it was a bunch of old preachers who they didn't want all these young attractive men sleeping with their wife, and so they put the rules in place.
It's a bloodline thing, right? I mean, that's why women's sexuality needs to be controlled anyway. Because if the patriarchy is in place and you have your woman controlled, well, then you know that the offspring are yours. And that means your bloodline is progressing and not, Joe who lives over there.
Yeah. And you need to control
Right.
the boys. You can't have these other men like going after your woman. No way. Oh,
Right.
keep them suppressed too.
Mhm.
Right.
I mean, I was kind of curious about going back through some of the WCG things I found
Mhm.
in the worldwide or in in the missing dimension in sex.
Yeah, we found a few references to the word masturbation in there.
Chapter
But
12,
only a
they were,
few.
but like what you're mentioning, Nancy, they kind of blended it all in with like other things like bestiality, but even like homosexuality, they threw everything all together in one pot, and they did that several times in that book.
Yep.
Or
And you know, in atheist circles, like when atheists are kind of like busting the claims of Christians a little bit, you know, they talk about the idea of poisoning the well. And I don't know if it's an exact example of that, but I feel like taking that list of things that generally people would say, like, yeah, that's not good, like bestiality for crying out loud, and then putting things like homosexuality and fucking masturbation in that same list. I mean, like, that's poisoning the well, right? Because you're putting in one thing in there that people are like, well, I know for sure that that's bad, but I'm not really sure about homosexuality. And like, I think masturbation is okay, isn't it? But here they are in that same list. So all of a sudden, you learn what's not okay.
But at the same time, during this time, there was the whole AIDS epidemic that was going on. So there was a lot of fear base going on against
No,
homosexualities, wasn't there?
there wasn't yet. There wasn't
Oh,
yet. So
okay.
I think it was like, well, maybe it was this last edition of Missing Dimension in Sex was 1981. So I think it was just pre-AIDS hitting the scene, or at least like in the
It was
news. He definitely talked about it later, though.
right, because I found a sermon that he mentioned
Oh,
talking about homosexuals and AIDS.
Tempting people on almost more than any other one thing today is sex. Now they try to make it possible to enjoy illicit sex in a way that God never intended. And in so doing, they enjoy the beauty of sex as God intended in marriage, and then the production of children, lovely little children to come along, and the beautiful family relationship of real, genuine love for temporary sensation. So today, they're beginning to find that what they sow, they reap. Now we have the new diseases now, AIDS, coming from homosexuality. So they try to justify homosexuality. Instead of trying to do away with it and teach it for what it is, they say, well, it's just his sexual preference. Well, indeed it is. And sin seems to be the preference of most people instead of righteousness. And yet they don't say, let's give up homosexuality and begin to obey God's laws. They say, no, let's break God's laws and let's try to find a way around it. And so the scientists now are trying desperately to find a cure for AIDS. Let people go ahead and break God's law. Let them bring on this disease. And then let us find some way to cheat God by a medicine that will cure it. And let me tell you, there is not a cure in 1,000 carloads or 1,000,000 freight carloads of medicines and drugs. There just isn't. You can't cheat God's laws and get away with it, brethren. You cannot do it.
Yeah, it was like early to mid 80s that sermon was. Sexual sin and homosexuals and AIDS and
that would make sense. That was like 1980 to 85, I think, is when that the panic over that was just ramping. I feel like that was a moment that the Herbert W Armstrongs of the world were just waiting for. And they were probably like creaming themselves over the fact that we can directly link homosexuality to this new horrible disease. They were probably just so happy that all of the things that they were wanting to be bigoted about could be proven now.
right.
But I mean, we know now that it spreads just as easily in heterosexual and homosexual couplings. It's just that at that time, because, you know, gay men didn't have a chance of getting pregnant and, you know, things were more free in that community, there was a lot more sex going on and a lot more partners, you know, because it's again the thing where that community had been disenfranchised and kept in a little box. And so there's probably going to be a little bit of a backlash against that. So there was a lot of sex going on, which meant that AIDS got spread more quickly within that community. And unfortunately, that meant that it got discovered within that community, and that's how that started hitting the news. And so before we know enough data to recognize this is equally a problem for all people having sex, it gets marked with this homosexual thing.
Yeah.
And then that's what carried it through and got used in bigoted ways, and probably just started like an entirely new wave of anti-gay stuff in our country or in the world, you know? Ugh.
Like another satanic panic almost, basically.
Yeah, Satanic Panic. It would have been around the time of Studio 54, right? Right, or right before the 80s, I think. Studio 54. When did that close?
I would say that's 70s.
That was 70s,
Mid
but
to late 70s.
I don't know anything about Studio 54.
Studio 54 was, I think it was essentially like just a gay club. I mean, a lot of famous people went there. It was very popular. But yeah, people had a lot of free sexual expression out of that. So I think there were a few instances where AIDS popped out of, people that would have attended that club.
I find it so interesting that everything I can find about the 70s, because I was born right at the end of the 70s, it feels like the 70s had this like freedom going on. Like Roe v. Wade had happened in like 73. By 78 or 79, something like that, women got the right to like have their own bank account without a man's name on it. That's how late that happened, by the way.
Yep.
So it's like all these great things were happening in feminism and stuff. And then Ronald Reagan got elected, and then family values and all of that shit started. And then Rush Limbaugh hit the airwaves. Like, I know.
I can't.
It's really frustrating to have realized we were that close to some more freedom. And then here we are all these years later, beating back down the conservative bullshit again. But anyway.
It seems like every time we come very close, they squash it immediately. But that's what they do. Like, we get that close to being able to progress further. They will find a way to squash it. It's like this is just an uphill battle.
Well, if we're going to shake up the natural order of the current order of things, and it has any potential threat to stop the ongoing profits of the people who have all the money, then we're going to be having to fight a little bit harder. Oh, I know. The other thing that I saw in The Missing Dimension of Sex that Herbert W. Armstrong said was that like men didn't have a need to masturbate. Like it was fine that they would just have natural nocturnal emissions to, relieve the pressure. So I kind of don't think he followed his own advice, because as we know, he had his little black book in which he kept a flog log and listed out apparently the times that he got it done. Yeah. So for any listeners that weren't with us for some previous episodes, it's well known apparently that Armstrong kept a log of his masturbatory sessions while also telling everyone else apparently that it was equivalent to bestiality. Oh, I know the thing that was really big that came up over and over. It was the idea that to masturbate is like a gateway to homosexuality.
Yep.
Oh, because you're touching.
Because you're touching yourself. Yep.
Yes, because you're like, oh, look at that dick.
So ridiculous.
But I'd never heard that one before, ever.
Me neither.
Like, not in anything to suggest that would like make you gay because you're getting a dick off. I
want to say it said it several times in the book too, like in the last couple of chapters.
But it was so subtle in the way that it said it. I feel like I should pull it out and figure it out, because it was like the way it said it, I was like, wait a second. And I wonder if that was what Armstrong did and we're still not even seeing it. How he just says things in such a way that you like get this idea, or you're like, I think he's equating that, but he's not really saying it. And it's enough. It's enough
and it
for our
on your
brains
mind.
to make.
Yes,
our brains make the link.
Because as an advertising man, he knew exactly how that worked as far as wording went.
This one line: often a boy will experience absent-minded proclivities following masturbation. What does that mean? Nancy, Armstrong was on to you.
So many different ways.
Most boys and many girls, so he understood about girls. Most boys and many girls get into the habit of masturbation at an age so young They simply cannot remember its beginning after growing up.
Hmm.
It is a nasty habit, often almost impossible to break. There is no greater plague. What the fuck?
No greater plague than a child exploring their body. Are you serious?
Calls it a plague.
Oh.
Yep.
What the fuck?
It says even a baby may discover a pleasurable sex sensation. It could and often does happen accidentally. Even before 1 year old, some babies may discover this and start masturbating. The parent should be constantly on guard. Oh God. Treat it in infancy in the same category as thumb sucking or putting a finger in his nose. Teach the child that he should not play with parts of his body.
I love how he says most boys and many girls.
I know.
Like he legit thinks boys masturbate more than girls. Wow. Okay.
It's still a pretty common way to think about it.
So yeah, this is called Truth About Masturbation, this section. Nearly all books about sex produced by the medical doctors assert that masturbation is not harmful. They, capitalized, are wrong. Why must humans, even the professionals, always go to one or the other extreme, as far from truth as possible? On one hand, many boys have been told falsely that masturbation causes insanity, loss, sterility.
Oh, like makes him sterile?
Yeah, I guess so. Pimples,
Seriously?
etc. But stating that this is not true. So he's using these extreme things like it's going to cause insanity so he can try to say that this is not true so he can kind of validate himself even more. That's what it
Mhm.
seems like here.
I feel like he did the same thing with how he talked about pleasure, that he would like say how, oh, those other churches, they make it seem like you should never have sex. It should never be
Right.
pleasurable. But look how gracious I am. I tell you that God does want you to, but only in this particular way where I can control you.
Right. But in the next paragraph, it talks about, on the other hand, masturbation is a form of perversion. It is a sin. It does harm the boy or the man physically over a period of 12 to 24 hours by dulling the mind, even causing a partial blurring of sight. I don't remember going blind. I must have been one of the
What?
elite.
Keep drinking the moonshine.
And acting as a partial anesthetic to the memory. What? Maybe I forgot that I was going blind. That's what happened.
A dulling
Often
of the mind. Well, that's kind
apparently.
of what this
And
other line
yeah.
was about too, was the idea that he's just gonna be like, "Oh, walking around kinda doing dumb shit afterwards because I just fucked myself." I don't know, I think a
Often
little afterglow is healthy.
Samantha, your face is glowing. Did you get a facial or something?
I masturbated all afternoon.
Often a boy will experience absent-minded proclivities following masturbation.
Oh my god. Okay, I got one more little paragraph here. Masturbation is either plain lust or else a desire for relief. But God provided for relief through the means of nocturnal emissions during sleep. If such natural relief is needed, the boy or man may induce it by sleeping on his back. Don't sleep on your stomach where you can kind of rub things.
You might hump your mattress.
Yeah, don't hump your mattress. Better sleep on your back so it can just, ooze out naturally as God intended.
And a woman's release? Where is that? Do we get one off when we're sleeping?
No, you don't.
Oh, we don't get the orgasms. Damn.
We just need to wait
don't need it.
until we have a husband so that we can make ourselves
needed.
available to him.
The thing is, though, if you're asleep, how the fuck do you know if you're touching yourself?
I don't know.
That's a good point. I wonder how many nocturnal emissions were actually
I'm gonna
sleepwalking. What do you think? Did you do that? Have you ever whacked it in your sleep, do you think?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
Really?
Really? While you're sleeping? Not just a wet dream?
Probably both. I always assumed that I probably was like unconsciously touching myself while I was sleeping. And that's why I woke up coming.
Oh, I always
I mean,
assumed it was just like
you
with
toss
no
and turn in
touching.
your sleep.
Yeah.
So, you rub your eyes or scratch your ass or whatever in your sleep. So if you're having like a horny sensation, why wouldn't your body want to respond to that without your knowledge of it? I mean,
Huh.
you're not
This is great.
conscious about it.
I'm kind of curious now. I want all the listeners to reply and let us know if their nocturnal emissions were potentially, aided in their
And
sleep.
you don't know what you're dreaming about all the time either. Could be a sex dream. Could be, who knows what. You wake up, don't remember what you were dreaming about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now I'm just curious, right? Like how many nocturnal emissions are like dream and no touch, and how many nocturnal emissions were the result of some sleepwalking.
Ridiculous.
I'm just wondering if we can call bullshit on the whole nocturnal emissions thing and be like, no, that's just sleep masturbation, guys.
I mean, I'm sure it can happen. I mean, the power of the mind is, yeah.
Very good point. Very good point.
But can we really make that much movement while we're sleeping, though? I've had some pretty in-depth sex dreams, but I'm not waking up to me rubbing myself one out.
I want data. I want hard data, guys.
I've always heard that girls will discover themselves more at a younger age. And it might not always be true, but
I can attest for that.
From parents that I've talked to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in some ways, society-wide, we tend to treat girls in a way that they would be more introspective, probably, or more like emotionally internal, and boys to be a little bit more like energy out in the world. So I could see that maybe boys would have a little more focus out here, and if girls are more inward focused, maybe they would discover stuff about themselves more early.
I don't know. My first sexual experience was with another girl, so maybe young girls were just experimenting on each other. So whatever.
And actually, that's considered totally normal. If kids are within like 4 years of age of each other, and they're just discovering things, like that's considered normal and natural, and it's not like dirty, wrong, or a problem.
Yeah, that section just keeps on going, and then it goes into circumcision.
Well, and I think when it comes to circumcision, part of it is quite like it affects masturbation too, right? Because like the whole idea of masturbating was so bad culturally back in like, I don't know, what is it, the turn of the century or something, that there was people like John Kellogg. Yeah. So literally Kellogg's cornflakes. This guy was totally puritanical, and he was like a crusader against masturbation for some reason. Like what that guy's traumas were, I'd really like to know. But so he was out there trying to sell his cornflakes. And he was trying to say like, you should eat my cornflakes because you've been eating all that like meat and eggs for breakfast, and it's making you so horny all the time. And so if you eat cornflakes, you won't be so hot-blooded or something like that. So he was super against masturbation to sell his cornflakes. But then he also, for some fucking weird reason, was like on a rampage to get doctors doing circumcisions on the regular, because they weren't before that. Like, this is not some Bible thing that carried forward. Fuck all the way off with that. This started again 100 years ago. And then, of course, it gets embedded into the medical community of like, well, there's a few extra $100 we can get for every birth that happens in the hospital, because this is happening at the same time that births are moving out of homes and into hospitals. And so everything's getting added on to that hospital bill. And then we take it as a cultural value because, well, so what John Kellogg said was it stops the masturbating. That was the whole point in the US when circumcision became standard. He advocated for the circumcision to be done extra tight. Like, it makes me so angry. Iron tight makes me so mad. So that, okay, because when there's
and you weren't even circumcised.
and I wasn't even circumcised. It just makes me so angry because it causes all these traumas for all these little boys in our country. And then women have to deal with the aftermath of men who are angry that their parts were fucked up when they were first born. So,
and lube.
When there's a foreskin, the foreskin rolls up and down. There is not this like sliding of dry skin on dry skin situation. And so there wasn't a need for lube. And so they thought, oh, that's going to stop it. They won't be able to masturbate if they can't roll their skin up and down. No, they just did it and they fucking hurt themselves because until we figured out lube and lotion and all that shit, like it makes me really angry. We can't take the human out of the human. We got to just honor the human, not try to make them not do what's human. Circumcision was promoted in this country with the express purpose of stopping boys from masturbating. Says everything you need to know about how we honored or didn't honor the bodies of the little people in this country. And so then we've got these hurt people who didn't get to even have their own bodies. We told them from the beginning their body wasn't theirs, and we think we're not going to cause generational harms over and over. I actually want to know from the listeners, because I'll just say right out here, most of our listeners are men. And so I would really like to know, what was your first lube that you found when you discovered yourself? Like Jason said, it was conditioner in the shower. How
Well,
about
it was
you?
either that. It was either that or trying to steal your mother's hand lotion and then possibly getting caught doing that.
I just need this for a minute, Mom.
As a 13, 14-year-old, you're not going to the store to buy lotion. So you're trying to keep everything pretty far under wraps.
But do boys always need lube if you're not if you're circumcised? Yeah, always.
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise, it gets pretty deadly, for sure.
A lot of surface area, and it's not like just generally.
You can cause damage very quickly
when you're a teenager and you're being very, very vigorous.
But he was young and vigorous. He was very vigorous, Father.
Vigorous?
Yes.
So there you go. Come on back for the circumcision episode, everyone. It's going to be a good time. Nancy and I, for our first few episodes, which I know you listened to, you were one of our very first fans. We kind of would come back at the end of each episode to say, well, all right, so what do we think about this topic now? You know, like birthdays or celebrating Christmas or whatever. So this is the moment when we all get to talk about what our adult relationship to our bodies and masturbation is like. And go.
Why don't you start us off, Pat?
Oh, shit. Okay. It's been a long road. I felt I didn't do it for quite some time, like especially when I first got married. I was like, I'm okay. I cannot do that now, right? Because now I can do it in the God healthy way, because I was an evangelical at the time. But that didn't last long because I had a removable shower head. And so when you have a removable shower head, you discover that it's actually a lot of fun to make sure you're really clean down there. And so I find that that's really useful, and it's a big part of my life these days, as are sex toys. And I'm not fully liberated. I still feel definitely weird saying all of this on camera, but yeah, I've figured it out, and I'm a sexual being, and I take care of myself and give myself self-love, masturbate quite frequently these days. Okay, I did it. Now you guys can. Who's next?
Well, I definitely held on to a lot of shame for many years between numerous relationships, several marriages. Okay, only 2. I want to get ahead of myself there. But I would say over the last year or so, I have felt a little bit more liberated within that, to where the aftermath, the shame has kind of dissipated quite a bit.
Yeah, good.
So
not fully gone yet, I assume.
I think when it really comes down to it is the whole pornography portion that I feel sometimes that there's still some shame attached to that. So versus thinking of my own past experiences, like I feel a little more free with that and not feeling shame of thinking of my past versus looking at stuff online. But at the same time, like it didn't help me continuing on with church later on into like after my 30s, and I was really connected with the evangelical or the Pentecostal church and all that shit. So that just reinforced a purity culture for me that much more, even though I wasn't really remaining pure behind the scenes, but still the shame's attached. It just reinforced shame.
I find it really interesting when groups of high control can attach such deep shame to something that is just like so human that it's going to happen no matter what. It's kind of like a gotcha for those groups because it's like, well, if I attach my shame onto those things, like you are never getting away from that. So, I mean, good for you that like, even if it's as recent as the last year that you're starting to move away from that and find freedom
Yeah.
to enjoy your own body and things like that. Like, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I'm not dead yet, so.
No. And maybe there'll be a point in your life when it's completely gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nancy?
For me, the guilt and shame was never there. Never. I know some people tried to make me feel guilty, not necessarily over masturbating, but like for, sleeping with men, sleeping with people. But I always just did it anyways. Like, I guess it never really bothered me. Now I've had my fun. Now I'm married to a hot guy who's fully intact. He's got all his penis. I enjoy it. When we have sex, I also masturbate. So yeah, and I have a box full of toys. And so I guess I don't really have any issues in that area. I just found it annoying that people would judge me for certain things, which I guess I just ignored because I just went and did what I wanted to anyway, while blocking out the noise around me. I really like smut, which definitely gets me going, especially hot movies. But smut is the way to go, which is just like sexy literature. I didn't realize the term smut pertained to just literature. And that's, yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that either. Hey, terminologies we all know now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of, maybe this is another episode, but I'm just kind of intrigued by the fact that we could have essentially heard some of the same messages and felt different things out of it. Like Jason and I definitely felt more shame and fear about it. And to me, the way that I kind of thought of that was like, well, I know that if I get in trouble with my parents, like that's risking everything. They're the ones that house me and feed me, and they have the power to hit my ass and hurt me. Right. And so it's like, to me, those things meant that when they shamed me about something, I internalized that because that was bigger than that moment. That was potentially my entire existence. Right. And so to me, that made sense that was fear inducing. And so I'm trying to figure out like what either didn't you connect with or what other conditioning didn't you get that like you just didn't catch all that guilt, or you were just like, yeah, okay, great that you think that. Now fuck off. I'm going to do what I want. Like, why does, like, what is it about us? Like, and how can we build that in? This is me thinking about kiddos again, it's like, how can we give that to future generations, that resiliency to know that, like, know who they are and know that they can have their bodies and their pleasure,
We need to not let religion control people.
Right. Isn't the answer to do evidence-based ways of raising kids, right? To work with the evidence of what our bodies are like and to normalize things that are normal, and things that are normal aren't going to hurt us.
And not hurt anyone else. What the fuck? Play just by kids touching themselves.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, we all are getting riled up about this topic because it really does matter. Topics like masturbation in our bodies that get to like the core of who we are and our ability to feel valid as an existing human. That is big shit.
Well, in one side note, you mentioned punishment like spanking, and I know I was spanked quite a bit at a young age. I don't know specifically if it had anything to do with me touching myself, but I feel like it does. I feel like there's something connected there.
Yeah.
Well,
Because I know when I was punished in that way with the paddle, a lot of the reasons why I was getting paddled, might have been because I was fighting with my brothers, but it wasn't every single time.
And sometimes you would just be punished and you wouldn't know why. I remember
Yeah.
I just knew I did something wrong. I don't know what it was or how to fix it. That was the main thing. How the fuck do I fix it then? Didn't know. I just stopped asking questions. I stopped progressing because I was just too afraid.
Right. But I know there was a few times just within, the confines of being in a bath that I would get in trouble numerous times touching myself and even getting yelled at. So I really wouldn't doubt it if I was spanked at that time.
Probably were.
Yeah. I want to point out too that there's this really strange thing that when a body is spanked, when a buttocks is smacked like that jiggles around the genitals. Yeah, like getting spanked is, there's a reason. It's not just a treatment of childhood traumas for reasons spanking shows up in kink things. Like it's a stimulant. It's bringing blood to the area. So I mean, to spank someone as a punishment for having a sexual thing is like kind of some bullshit. Because, well, think about it. Spanking in general, no matter if it's for a sexual thing or not, like I'm going to do something to you that kind of is going to mimic some sexual pleasure. And also, you're in trouble and feeling pain. That is some fucked up shit in the brain. So, all right. Well, here at the Apostate Sisters, we advocate for no circumcisions, no spanking, and a whole lot of fucking honesty and being truthful with our kids about all of that body shit.
And a whole lot of masturbating.
And a whole lot of masturbating because you own your body and don't let anyone else convince you otherwise. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for our very first episode of season 2 here at the Apostate Sisters. This was just one window into all the ways that we're going to investigate our bodily autonomy and push back against how the church and society at large tried to take that from us. Join us next time. Like and subscribe. Woohoo!
Bye! Thank you.
And a massive thanks to Jason, our #1 fan, for being here for this episode on masturbation.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
I hope it was pleasurable for you, Jason.
Oh, I hope so.
Oh, it was great. Glad to be here.
Flog that log, Fats. Okay.
It sounds like it's underwater.